Excellencies, colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to have me present today. My name is Brian Morales. I'm the branch chief for counter-narcotics at the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. I'm going to share my screen so I can share with you some slides about the topic I want to discuss today, which are synthetic drugs and what we're doing as an international community to respond to it at this point in time in September of 2024. I want to start off as basic sort of information that when I use the word synthetic drugs, I'm referring to those drugs that are produced by chemicals. And those are drugs that are readily accessible and produced now in a new pattern that we're seeing around the world more and more each day. Whereas in the past, we were referring primarily to organic or plant-based drugs. Those are those that grow in the field. Now, certainly there have been synthetic drugs for a very long time, so this is not new, but the rate at which they are being produced and sold and the new patterns and dynamics are what is alarming for the international community. What am I referring to? Well, we see that most of these synthetic drugs are being produced with chemicals that are legal, easily accessible chemicals. When you look at a drug like fentanyl, which is affecting the United States, 85% of those precursor chemicals are legal chemicals that are sold by chemical companies. And so they are very affordable. You can turn $3,000 worth of chemicals into $3 million worth of profit. And you basically need a basic understanding of chemistry to be able to produce these synthetic drugs. The instructions are on the internet. You can produce in a matter of hours, if not days. So the chemical development, the ability to innovate, the scale of production is just to a much greater degree than we've ever seen with drug production before. And you can produce the drugs in very small packages, small amounts. So as a drug trafficking organization or person on that side, it's sort of a no-brainer that this is the direction for drug production for the future. You need this is a very interesting chart because you can see on the left, this is the traditional plant-based drug supply structure. You need a lot of cultivators and farmers, fewer producers, fewer exporters and importers, and more wholesalers and retailers. When you look at synthetic drugs, on the right-hand side, look at that pyramid structure. You need just a few producers and chemists, and then some exporters, importers, then more wholesalers and retailers. So when you look at that pyramid structure, you could see really that the dynamics around how we address and look at this and where we identify the points of intervention are different than the traditional plant-based structures. And no country is immune from synthetic drugs. We are seeing these throughout the world being produced in all regions. Recently, the president of Sierra Leone earlier this year declared a public health emergency related to one synthetic drug called Kush. And so when we looked at the composition of Kush, we noted that it included protonidazines, which are very powerful synthetic drugs. It's a class of fentanyl that has very, very strong properties that cause overdose. And it's about 3 to 10 times more potent than fentanyl, which is what's driving the U.S. overdose crisis in the United States. We had over 100,000 Americans die over the past few years, and fentanyl is the primary cause of most of these deaths. So when you look at these synthetic drugs and how they're spreading not just to the United States, but countries around the world at different socioeconomic levels, such as Sierra Leone, where there's now a domestic market for this synthetic drug, shipped and trafficked to the country for its domestic population, it shows that every country is affected. Every country has the ability to be impacted and have its own health emergency. And where it doesn't have a health emergency, the populations of our countries, our global community, can order these synthetic drugs online. They are not only easy to produce and cheap to produce, they can very easily be sold through the dark net or through social media. And they can be shipped worldwide from any country to any country in very small quantities in the mail and shipped right to the doorstep of the consumer. So for traditional law enforcement, where you're looking for the drugs at a major port of entry in very large quantities and large packets through traditional methods, You could still find some of that happening, but you also have these new dynamics that are taking shape. So what has the international community decided to do about this? Secretary Blinken from the US Department of State launched the Global Coalition to Address Synthetic Drug Threats on July 7th of 2023, bringing together other governments around the world that are interested to collaborate, to develop new strategies, new opportunities for engagement to look at addressing this issue. The ministerial meeting was huge. It was a 4-hour event with over 80 participants. Of those, over 50 ministers spoke and gave remarks at this. Ministers of foreign affairs, of health, of interior, of all different sort of agencies and walks of life. So it was a very enriching experience. And from the resolve of this event, which, by the way, also had international organization heads, we had 12 international organizations join. From the resolve of this ministerial meeting, we then, here's another shot, we then launched a series of high-level engagements following that July 7th ministerial meeting. In September of last year at the UN General Assembly, we came together with other foreign ministers to once again express our resolve. There was a UN General Assembly resolution that was then negotiated and passed by the end of the year around this issue of synthetic drugs. In March, the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs, which is the big drug meeting that takes place every year, for the first time, we had a US Secretary of State that attended this meeting. And there was a high-level segment where, once again, we discussed the issue of synthetic drugs, and there were political commitments that were made. And now in September of 2024, we have the UN General Assembly coming up once again, another event that we are organizing. In this case, President Biden will be there with other world leaders, and we will once again reaffirm our support and commitment to the synthetic drug, addressing the synthetic drug issue. So this is what we're doing at a policy at a high level to continue that momentum. And what are we doing at an operational level? Well, we established 3 working groups, one on manufacturing and trafficking, which is what we typically call the supply side. Group number 3, which is on public health, which is what we typically call the demand side. And then we also created working group number 2 around data collection, which we call detecting threats and emerging patterns. But you'll notice that under each of these working groups, we have sub-working groups. So 1.1 and 1.2, one on manufacturing of synthetic drugs and the precursors that make them, as well as trafficking of synthetic drugs. 2.1 and 2.2, one sub-working group on data collection, analysis, and trends that includes early warning. One sub-working group on information sharing, interagency collaboration, and policy formulation. And finally, sub-working groups 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. 3.1 is on prevention. 3.2 is on what we typically would say on the harm reduction, treatment, recovery side. And 3.3 is on populations that are involved with the criminal justice system, including the intervention of ATI, or Alternatives to Incarceration. So these are the sub-working groups and the working groups. We have had now 150 hours of meetings over the past year. Beginning in October of 2023, we had one meeting to frame the issue. We had another set of meetings from November to February on identifying best practices, models, where we can actually intervene. And then we moved on, we had a midterm check-in, and then we moved on into the phase of action planning and implementation, asking countries for those deliverables and commitments that they would like to make. And then we moved into evaluation and transition to then focus on sustainability, coming to the final working group meeting in September. You'll notice that there's a West and an East session because there's no time zone where the whole world can come together live to communicate. So these were live meetings that took place on Zoom with simultaneous interpretation into 6 languages. And they were each working group and sub-working group in each of the regions was led by 2 co-chairs for each of these. And there you can see on the screen the flags of the co-chairs for each of the countries that participated. And in total, we had 1,600 registrants for the coalition. And these participants came from 158 countries. Important to note that these are government representatives and that these meetings that we had were meetings of governments and of international organizations. There were 15 international organizations that participated. You see the names of those organizations on the screen. And we had a website that is, you can check out, and you could see under sub-working groups the actual recordings of all of the sessions that we've had over the past year by sub-working group. You'll notice that only the presentations are recorded and the discussions were kept private. And in some cases, some recordings were also private based on the requests of the presenters. But we have documented as much as possible on the coalition website. And that website that you see there is globalcoalition.us. And it's not just about governments. We also brought together, of course, international organizations, as I mentioned, but also civil society organizations. And we worked with the Vienna NGO Committee to help us do that. And then we also worked with an organization called ISUP, the International Society of Substance Use Professionals, to help convene coalition members as well. We also worked with universities and are very grateful to ICU-DDR, the International Consortium of Universities for Drug Demand Reduction, that held panels of global coalition discussions with regional university networks throughout the world. And finally, the private sector was the other sector that we engaged with very closely. This is an ongoing collaboration with all of these sectors, but with the private sector, we are particularly interested in the chemical, shipping, the consignment sector as well. Those are what you might consider like the DHLs, Federal Express, those types of companies. Social media, e-commerce, the banking sector, and artificial intelligence sector. So what did we do? Well, we, as a network, came up with 68 different recommendations from the coalition of where we can make impact in each of the sub-working groups. Then we worked with the international organizations to help identify 120 different initiatives where we can collaborate as an international organization, as an international community. And so the results of that, or the achievements of year one, as we kind of round out and start working on developing a report, is to say that we have had a series of achievements, accomplishments over the past year in building our network and building our structure in getting poised to now take operational action. So this is very much like we've spent the year building a vehicle. We built the car. Now we enter the second year where it's time to drive it and to take it to our destination. So we will begin full implementation phase in October. Some projects have started kind of in a slower kind of ramp up phase, but in October we will move forward with all of our major initiatives, and we will be looking for outcomes, measurable impacts, measurable outcomes in reducing synthetic drugs around the world and building the infrastructure necessary to do that more effectively. We look to do that and publish another report by the end of next year. So what is left to accomplish? We need to operationalize these initiatives, and there are three pillars or three areas of work where we will be collaborating. First, we're going to have collective meetings, global meetings, like a donors conference, a thought leaders conference, to help bring greater attention, to help coordinate our work better, and help look at the vision for where the field is going. Next, we will be organizing regional meetings as well to discuss the dynamics region by region, the synthetic drugs that are most relevant to those regions. And then we'll be looking toward lines of action. What do we do concretely in each of the working group areas? And so for that last one, the lines of action, just to summarize, I don't want to read too much because I know I'm running out of time, but we will be working a lot more, once again, on public-private partnerships across those industries that I mentioned. We will be looking to promote international communication and intelligence sharing platforms so that we can have governments use them more and share more information and work together on operations commonly. We will be improving data collection systems and working with governments to build their internal capacity to collect and report data and know basically what substances are present in their countries. We will also be working with governments to build a network of legislators, because there's a lot of legislation that's missing around the world in this field. And so we want to make sure that governments are better able to address these different dynamics by having strong and effective legal systems in place. And then we will be looking from the public health side on improving the quality and strengthening the global public health workforce, as well as the professionalization through credentialing and the accreditation of the services that provide prevention, treatment, recovery services. We also would like to expand availability and access to substance use prevention, harm reduction, treatment, recovery, and ATI programs. Availability and access is key. So I want to conclude by saying that over the next few months, we will be having several regional events, as I mentioned, a Middle East drug dialogue in mid-October. Then the African Union will convene governments in a consultation on supply reduction in Madagascar. In December, the African Union will convene a demand reduction consultation on public health in Tanzania. And then, as I mentioned, the Donor and Thought Leaders Conference will also take place next year. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your time and attention today, and look forward to engaging all of you on the Global Coalition, and looking forward to a second year of partnership and urgent action from all of us. Thank you.